Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our live mock draft version 2. Now, of course, just like last week, to kind of explain the whole premise of the live mock draft, pretty much as you see on screen by now, we have a fun little mock draft set up here, a Pro Football and Sports Network one. If you have any interest in using this one, it's got free trades, so hard trades. It's kind of hard to get them pushed through, but free trades nonetheless. So we have enjoyed using it so far. But yes, moving on from that, we will just go back and forth with each of our picks. Callan will pick odds this time around, and I will pick all the even picks this time around. And then by the end of it, after kind of bouncing ideas off of each other and having to read and react, it'll be our live mock draft results, I guess, for lack of a better term. Speaking of trades, just a quick little kind of explanation. So the trades are very hard to push through. It's kind of hard to get it to give the exact value or whatever you want to look at, what it needs to be able to accept it. So the way we've been doing it is you can try trades if you want. There is trades in this mock draft, but you get 3 rejections if it doesn't think it's a good enough trade. And then after that, you just kind of got to pretend like you couldn't find anybody to trade with, which happens in the NFL draft. So not the most off the wall idea. So before we get into this, one more little proclaimer, I guess. I have a little bit of a weird like head cold going on right now. So if I sound weird or you kind of hear some sniffling from me or a random cut, I might have went into a coughing fit. But we're gonna really hope that we can make it through this episode without it. And no better way to try to make it through something than just jumping right into it. So I will let Callan take the honors here with the Tennessee Titans in the first overall pick.
And with the first overall selection, and if I was running the Titans here, I would take Abdul Carter, the fantastic edge rusher out of Penn State, who actually moved to edge rusher this past season to enhance his abilities because he was an off-ball linebacker the last few years. So the fact that he can play both reminds me a little bit of Micah Parsons. Not saying he is Micah Parsons, just that he reminds me of that kind of player because he can play both the off-ball and the edge rusher. So we'll see how well he can match Micah Parsons if that ever comes to fruition. But I think that as far as the Titans go here, they go with Abdul Carter and they match him up with Jeffrey Simmons and Devondre Sweat on the inside of their interior rush to finally give them a solid edge rusher and a defensive star on that defensive side of the ball.
Very interesting. Yes, they don't go quarterback. They forgo the Cam Ward pick and go with edge rusher. I love the point you made with him going from off-ball to on-ball linebacker because that's a very common thing that we're seeing, not really over the past years. We saw it with Parsons in 2022, 2023. Can't remember exactly which year. I think 22, but I'm not positive on that. We saw with him, of course, that year. And then now this year we have 2 of them with both Abdul Carter, who went from off-ball to edge rusher, and then also Jalen Walker from Georgia still kind of does both, but he technically went from off-ball to edge rusher. So just really interesting to see that and kind of that change there. But nonetheless, the Titans forego quarterback is a very interesting pick.
I think they give Levis one more shot.
Cal and I were just kind of talking about this right before we started. If Levis was Brian Callahan's guy, if he drafted him, if Callahan was head coach when Levis was drafted, I say 100% give him one more shot, give him one more year as a starter. But since he's already was part of the old regime and Brian Callahan kind of brought in the new regime and just kind of kept him as maybe a like what brought him there, or maybe just kind of as a throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. But I don't think that happens here. I think they go quarterback, whichever one they deem to be the top. I think it's Cam Ward. But nonetheless, it does not hurt to get the top edge rusher in a class ever. I mean, a lot of teams have done it and found a lot of success in it. One of those teams being the Cleveland Browns, who took Myles Garrett back in 2018 and found a lot of success with that pick right there. So now with number 2, I was going to go Abdul Carter. I kind of expected Callan to go Cam Ward. I was 100% going to go Abdul Carter, get somebody to go across from Myles Garrett and just have some bookend edge rushers right there. Now I'm a little lost. I mean, of course, Cam Ward's sitting there staring at you now. I don't think they go quarterback right now. They trade for Kenny Pickett, which is by no means a blockbuster trade, not like they had to give much up. But they trade for Kenny Pickett this offseason. They still have Deshaun Watson on contract, whether he's ready to go or not, whether they're willing to give him another chance or not. Of course, you can take your quarterback of the future, but if you're going to take your quarterback of the future and let him sit for another year or see what he can be in the future, you don't take a 25-year-old like Cam Ward is, right? I think he's about 25, if I'm not mistaken. It may say.
He's 24, 25 because he started at Utah.
Yep. I know he's a little older. So, yeah. So you get a little bit of this older quarterback. You don't do that when you're taking kind of your future generation. You kind of take those older quarterbacks when it's a little more of a now need, like the Broncos did with Bo Nix.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually going to have something wild happen, and I'm going to say that they also forego quarterback, and we don't see either of the top 2 picks being quarterback, and they take the do-it-all guy with Travis Hunter. I mean, right now they're a little beat up at receiver. They do, of course, still have Denzel Ward over on that cornerback side, but you don't really – you can't just survive off of one elite corner, which Denzel Ward is, but you can't survive off of one of them. Travis Hunter, you bring him in however you want to play him, you can play him. I think you bring him in and play him as corner first and then let him just kind of be your gadget guy on the offensive side of the ball. But nonetheless, I do have them kind of taking the jersey seller, the fun pick, more than maybe what might be the smart pick in them going Travis Hunter over Cam Ward.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the number 1 overall prospect here when in terms of the offensive side of the ball. And even possibly the defensive side of the ball, besides Abdul Carter, because he can play corner. And just recently, I mean, he played both sides of the ball as recent as just this past season. So the fact that he did it in college shows that I think he can do it a little bit in the NFL, but not. I couldn't see a full 17 games out of him.
Definitely
not completely, all defensive snaps, all offensive snaps.
No, I completely agree.
Special teams.
You play all of one side, of course, and then you just kind of. That's why I think
dabble in.
I think that's why you play corner and then just like gadget, because the receivers on offense rotate so much more than the cornerbacks in the secondary. So I think that makes a lot more sense to go corner and then minor and receiver. I guess you can say major and corner, minor and receiver, however you want to look at it. But I think that's what he does pretty much no matter where he goes. I think there's very few teams right now that have him go full-time receiver.
Deion did it a little bit.
Just a little bit, just enough. But yeah, another thing I could definitely see happening here is actually the Browns trading back and thinking like, hey, we can still get more value somewhere else. But I can't really think of any teams who are willing to kind of splurge and give up a ton of value right now to jump X number of picks and jump the New York Giants, unless you kind of bait the Giants into doing it with you or something like that just to get some extra draft value. But so right here, I'm just going to have them sticking and picking.
Yeah, well, I'm going to move on here to the 3rd overall pick, and that's the New York Giants, who are now in quite a position here because I expected to take Travis Hunter here, and I expected the Cleveland Browns to go Cam Ward, all honesty, but it's tough here now. Do they go quarterback because they just signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston? So
when you're sitting there at 3 and you have Cam Ward staring you down, I don't know how you let him slip. If he slips past 3, you don't know where he's going to go because none of these teams pass need quarterback. He falls to at least 6. Maybe past that. Wow. That's a fun little. I don't think it happens. I don't think there's any way he makes it past the front 2. But it's a fun.
It's not likely, but let's say the not likely happens, and they go offensive line to protect Russell Wilson, and they draft Will Campbell, the great offensive tackle at LSU, who's had a little bit of some falling lately in some drafts, but I think that he'll go pretty high here because he really has the elite level left tackle ability. He's better in the pass blocking than the run blocking, and that's not a huge difference in terms of skill level, really, in his skill level at least. So we'll see how well he fits into New York with that offensive line and see if he's able to protect Russell Wilson and where that takes the Giants this season.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, this is This is definitely possible. I don't see it happening, but it is possible. I don't know what I do as the Patriots here right now if this happens. They don't really need. Just looking at their needs, I almost want to go somebody like Jalen Walker. They need a little bit of pass rush, but they also need an off the ball guy. They are just so barren at linebacker right now. But does Jalen Walker go 4 is the question. I just don't really see anybody trading up right here. It's not like you're not jumping anybody for a quarterback. There's not really anybody the Jags are going to take that you're willing to give up the capital to jump in front of them for. This is tough. I don't really know.
It makes it fun. I thought this would at least just make it fun.
I'm going to do it just because it fits what they need so much. I think this is definitely a reach for Jalen Walker. But, you know, they bring in Mike Vrabel, former linebacker, very much of a do-it-all defensive guy. Just put him on the field and let him track the ball down, which is what Jalen Walker is. He's so good sideline to sideline. If you want to send him after the quarterback, he'll go get the quarterback. I think he's got a great Mike Vrabel mentality. So it's definitely a reach, but you go get your guy right here. You go get Jalen Walker and shore up that barren linebacking core right now. Don't have a ton to say about it because I don't love it, but I don't think they find any trade partners, and I think they end up not having to take their guy here, but kind of having to take their guy here a little earlier than they expected.
Yeah, you know, being the off-ball and edge rusher type of player, maybe that's the new defensive star position. But you know about my disdain and bad taste with Georgia players. And they're smart players, they're elite athletes, but that doesn't always transition into star football players. So we'll see how well Jalen Walker is able to perform. He does go in a good situation with the Patriots here and Mike Vrabel, so he's got the best possible ingredients around him to really perform well. But we'll see how he does if he ends up with the Patriots. And moving on to
very interesting.
Moving on to number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Probably the easiest pick so far right now because they immediately jump up and go Mason Graham, defensive tackle out of Michigan. Probably the second or third best overall prospect in this draft, and second or third best overall defensive prospect for sure. And he goes right along with Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen down there in Jacksonville for them to now have an interior presence led by Mason Graham, and it'll be really quite the impact that he will have on that defense will be huge. And I think that this is the most likely pick to happen, and just because need fits the position here, and he's also probably the best player left available.
Yeah, certainly. I made this same pick because it's just so perfect for what Jacksonville has right now. They have 2 really solid edge rushers, as Callum just mentioned, and no one in the middle there to eat up kind of those middle guys. So those edge rushers are just constantly getting chip blocked. They're constantly getting those double teams. They have no help right now on the edges since they're on the 2 edges. Mason Graham brings automatic help. Maybe not the highest ceiling in this draft, but I'd say definitely one of the, if not the highest floors in this draft. He's going to come in. He's going to be a day 1 starter. Mm-hmm. Such a good pick for the Jaguars here. I love it. And I don't love my situation right now because I've been sitting here looking at my board and I just don't know what to do. I mean, maybe they go Genty here. Genty's kind of been a little bit of a consensus for them here. I don't love it just because I think running backs are so easy to get, kind of the dime a dozen running backs that I always talk about. So using a top 10 pick on a running back, I just don't love. But I just don't see anybody jumping up right here. I mean, with a quarterback on the board, you got to think maybe someone does, but just who is the question? The Saints have some draft capital. Maybe they jump over the Jets and see what they can do to kind of get ahead and make sure kind of block anybody else out from jumping up and getting in front of the Jets. With Cam Ward on the board, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders on the board, it's kind of your pick on which one you want. Maybe the Steelers jump up, but that's just such a huge jump from the Steelers trying to go from 21 all the way to 6. So I don't know if that's something that they're necessarily able to pull off. Maybe you even see, your Titans or Giants jump up, kind of in the same way the Texans did back in
Oh.
2023 when they take C.J. Stroud number 2 and then automatically trade back up and take
Yes.
Will Anderson Jr. number 3. I think maybe you see something like that here if you see Cam Ward fall this far.
I see the Saints jumping up.
I kind of see the Saints jumping up too.
Fall this far.
I mean, it's just so good to jump in front of the Jets. Yes, the Jets did just trade for Justin Fields, but is that going to be your guy of the future? So you do what you can to go ahead and get ahead of the Jets, get ahead of everybody else, and I think that the Saints do exactly that. Now the question is, can I actually figure out how to get the Saints to do that? I mean, it's the easiest for them. They're the closest, so they're going to have to give up the least technically. Let's see. Let's just try basic first. I don't think it'll go. Let's do a little more. Yeah. Okay. Here's the fun part.
It's only 3 spots. It shouldn't be that much.
It is 3 spots within the top 10, though, is the only thing.
But you're moving you yourself are moving within the top 10.
That's true.
It's not
Raiders still stay in top 10 too.
Trying to jump into 6. You're just the 9 trying to jump into the 6.
Uh-oh. I'm not liking this. Okay, last time when I got my one trade, it was on the 3rd one. So let's see if I can make lightning strike twice. Let's do like shit, I don't know.
Gotta include next year's first.
You think?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like too much though. I wish it would tell you, like, you know, like in Madden, it has the little bar that shows you how close you are. I wish it gave you something like that. Okay, well then I hate going with the consensus, but he is an absolutely elite prospect right now. The Raiders need running back. They have Zamir White and Raheem Mostert right now, who both of those are good guys, but Raheem Mostert's aging, and Zamir White just showed that he's not a true number 1. He's much more of a number 2, change of pace back. So you're going to go get your number 1 right here. You tried to get some trades. You called and see if anybody wanted to move up for quarterback, and they didn't. So you just go ahead and get your running back from the future on a 5-year option with Ashton Jeanty. There's not really much to say about this one just because he's such a solid prospect. He's going to go into pretty much any team without an elite running back right now and make a huge change on their offense. Takes a lot of pressure off of Geno Smith and kind of really matches what Pete Carroll wants to do in an offense with that play action, multiple running back scheme, different type of running back schemes to give you that 1-2 punch. So I really like Jeanty here. I just think 6 a little early.
Yeah, I see what you mean about 6 being a little early. That's higher than Bijan, and everybody was really high on Bijan Robinson. So, need fits the position here. As I said before, I think it's the most likely pick for the Raiders if they stick here. But I really think that if Cam Ward starts to fall this far, somehow the Saints find a way to jump in front of the Jets.
Someone does.
Who don't get their choice of quarterback here. Because as we remember, the Jets have Justin Fields.
Yep.
So that's probably not really your future. So they go with their quarterback of the future and the present. And I think they take the jersey seller and they draft Shedeur Sanders. And I think that Sanders is maybe not as big of an arm as Cam Ward, and maybe isn't the most as athletic as Cam Ward, but I think that he's just a pure football player because that's the family he grew up in, and that's the way he's been coached. And I think that that's just he's going to be the one most likely to just show up on the football field every Sunday, be there for the game, and ball out. And I think that if that's what the Jets want to do with Justin Fields, which is kind of that dynamic playmaker instead of really a quarterback, then this is the way they need to go with Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, there is one thing that I think Shadir definitely does better than Cam Ward, and that's handle the pressure, handle the big stage, just because, like you said, he grew up with it. He grew up with the pressure. He grew up on the big stage. He grew up behind or on the camera with Dion, of course, being his father. So the only two teams that I think it makes any sense for them to go Shedeur Sanders over Cam Ward is one of the New York teams. Because when you're on one of the New York teams, it seems to be more with the Jets than the Giants even. But either one of the New York teams, you are automatically on a bigger stage. You're automatically under more pressure, more scrutiny at any given time. So 30 teams in the NFL, I say that's a terrible pick. How do you go? What?
32.
No, 30 teams in the NFL, I say that's a terrible pick.
Oh, I see.
Why would you do that? But 2 teams in the NFL, I'm like, okay, I can see you doing that. And this is one of those 2 being the New York teams. So
Yep.
so I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I do definitely see the reasoning behind it. So now moving on past that, and now we are sitting here at pick 8 with Cam Ward still on the board.
And
which is very interesting because the Panthers don't need quarterback. I mean, Bryce Young finally was playing some of his best football at the end of last year. That just makes no sense to take a quarterback right here. I got to imagine somebody tries to jump up, but in dead honesty, I just don't really want to try to do a trade again. I mean, because I don't really know who would jump up. Now it would have to be like the Steelers jumping all the way up, which I just don't see happening right now. They do have a lot of draft capital, so if they wanted to, in this situation, I think that the Steelers could definitely jump up. And you know what? Actually, just for the hell of it, I'm at least going to try. Because, I mean, they overjumped the Saints here, and they go get their quarterback way earlier than I expected them to, but at a pretty good value at this point. I could see it happening. What they have to give up, that's the real question. Definitely the 2s, or definitely both of your firsts this year and next year. Probably like the 2nds from both years and this. I mean, you're jumping into the top 10 from 21. You're going to have to give up some value. Hey! Wow. First try. Okay, hey, maybe we are starting to figure out this whole trade thing. So now here, it's finally happening. They thought that they were going to have to wait all the way to 21 and just get whoever fell into their lap. But now they're sitting in a scenario where they can actually be aggressor. You can go get it. You go get Cam Ward, who has fallen all this way to number 8, jump in front of the Saints. I think this is about the best case scenario it gets for the Steelers. I don't think it gets much better than this exactly happening for them. Yes, you give up a lot, but you get what is very arguably, and in my opinion, the best quarterback in the draft, barely inside the top 10 at this point. So that is just such good value for them, even with all that trading, and they get their guy for the future.
You gave up your entire day 2. You can take the next. Steelers can take this pick and wait till day 3 of the draft.
Literally.
They won't have another selection if this happens. Wow. That is quite the selection for the Steelers. Like you said, probably best case scenario for the Steelers, who get their quarterback of the future to go along with Aaron Rodgers.
No, I don't think it happens, which is why this is best case scenario.
Right. So for the Steelers, who is their quarterback, if they don't trade up for Cam Ward, if this doesn't happen for them, their worst case scenario is Mason Rudolph.
Oof.
So
he's not bad, but he's not your guy. He's not your guy.
But as far as if this really happens, it really is best case scenario for the Steelers, who get probably one of the better athletes in the draft this year, and probably the biggest arm in the draft this year. So they'll be able to throw those deep passes to DK Metcalf and George Pickens. So it's great for the Steelers, and it's heartbreaking for the Saints, who I stutter because I don't know what to do now. I was waiting for Cam Ward to fall in their laps. So I think that they go and they still have Derek Carr, so they still have a decent quarterback. They need to protect him. So I think they go Membu out of Missouri, one of the most raw prospects, but probably the higher ceiling out of the offensive tackles. more of a pure right tackle. But hey, that'll go along well with the Saints, who really struck out with Trevor Penning. So they need that right tackle still, who's left kind of a hole, with Penning kind of being a bust, and so they at least get some offensive line protection for Derek Carr and hope for the best.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that at all, especially with all the injury troubles they've been having with Ryan Ramczyk recently. I mean, when they had him at right tackle, it's one of the best their offensive line has ever been. No, not just because of him, but because in general they had a good offensive line and a bookend right tackle to help them out, a need bookend right tackle, which is exactly what you pick up here. He's a total run blocker, very raw, but just an athletic freak. You can kind of get him in and mold him however you want. They run that very gadgety offense already with Taysom Hill being in there, just kind of wherever Taysom Hill wants to play, and speedy guys like Rashid Shaheed.
Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah, Rashid Shaheed. Okay, I had it right. So they already have a very gadgety offense, so why not just go get an absolute mauler of an athlete? I don't mind that pick at all. I think that's not bad for the Saints, especially after the tornado that just went on in front of them. I mean, they're sitting there like, what the hell is going on at this point? And now they just passed the buck over to the Bears, and the Bears are sitting here saying, what the hell is going on? They're looking at the board right now, and there's just not really anything fitting their needs. But I mean, all of the good tackles are gone. There's no running back left. Ashton Genty's already gone, and there's no other running backs that are kind of worth taking a reach on right now. Edge rusher is kind of my biggest need for them. This is saying offensive tackle, but like I just said, offensive tackle is gone, and there isn't really many of the top edge rushers left either. So it's a little bit of a toss-up for the Bears right here. I got to think about this one for a second. I could almost see them going receiver. You know, you lose Keenan Allen this offseason. You still have DJ Moore, but he's getting a little older, and he's kind of such a hit or miss guy. Maybe you want someone who's a little more consistent after Rome Odunze didn't have the best season as a rookie. What do you have left here? This is tough. This has got me in a
quite a different kind of mock draft than the traditional one right now.
Very, very interesting. I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to have them going receiver, but then now the question becomes, what kind of receiver do you want? Ted McMillan is probably the most different guy that you can get right here. Right now you have DJ Moore, who's very gadgety, very kind of behind the line of scrimmage, just get the ball in his hands and let him do him. Then you have your Rome Odunze, who's much more of a kind of all-around polished route runner, just your possession guy. He's going to be open no matter what. So you let Caleb Williams do his crazy USC stuff that he always used to do, running around the backfield and then chucking it downfield, and you get him a guy to chuck it downfield to. Maybe it's a little bit of a stretch. In fact, I would completely agree if you said it's a little bit of a stretch, no doubt about it. But with how this draft has fell right now, they are just like, you know what? Let's get the best receiver on the board and let's just go home for the day and call it a day. We survived that tornado. It didn't hit our house. So they grabbed Ted McMillan. They get Caleb Williams more weapons. Maybe you want to get him more protection more than more weapons, which I think would be much better for him. With how the board fell, there's not really the highest end of protection left, so you get him the highest end weapon left on the board.
Yeah, this definitely would be a high pick or a high reach for Ted McMillan, who's I've seen as high as this pick, but also as low as lower first round. So he's really can be anywhere on this draft board, and I'm surprised that he falls into the top 10 here. I think the Bears, if in this situation, would have traded out with someone. I'm not sure who.
I don't know who trades up. I was thinking the same thing, but I just don't know who trades up.
Someone that would need a corner or the tight end. But I couldn't really think of anyone because the San Francisco 49ers were next, and they're the ones who need a corner, and they go and they draft their former coach, Jim Harbaugh's guy, and draft Will Johnson, probably the second best corner here behind Travis Hunter out of Michigan. And I think that he'll fit nicely in the 49ers defense, who lost Charvarius Ward over the offseason. So they need someone to line up in that number one corner spot. And I think that Will Johnson can step in right away and play from day one.
Yeah, certainly. Overall, I like Jahadi Barron more at corner, just as kind of he's my favorite corner on the board. But I think that he's a lot more of an inside guy. I think that's a little more where he's going to thrive. While Will Johnson will be a little bit more of your outside guy, which is exactly what they need. Because the 49ers always find good rotation of safeties and slot corners to kind of be good run support and take that inside. But with Ward gone and them not having like Sherman or any kind of those outside good guys like they've had over the past couple of years, that's what they need, is they need their new number one corner. So I do for them like the pick of Will Johnson over Jahadi Barron.
Mm-hmm.
So now moving on to 12 with the Dallas Cowboys. This is kind of loosely in my head where I expected Ashton Jeanty to fall, but then after not being able to find a trade partner, the Raiders just go ahead and snag him up when they could. Now you fall to the Cowboys, who need a little bit of everything right now. And I think that they get just a little panicked. Not crazy panicked, but take a little bit of a reach here. You see it happen a lot when someone gets taken earlier, kind of before it was expected. So I think that the Bears taking Ted McMillan kind of throws the Cowboys off on this one and makes them reach for a receiver of their own and get a guy to go across from CeeDee Lamb. And they go ahead and go with Matthew Golden. And this is not letting me pick. So I don't really know what's happening. It still thinks it's the 49ers. Oh, we somehow paused the draft. Okay, there we go. Crisis averted. So the Cowboys take a little bit of a reach here. They panic when they they panic and they a little bit when they see a receiver get taken ahead of them. So they get who is also very arguably the best wide receiver in this draft, just for very different reasons. They get Matthew Golden out of Texas and that blazing 4.29 speed that he showed off at the combine. That kind of shoots him up the board a little bit and gets him to a near top 10 pick.
Yeah, this would probably be the best case scenario for the Cowboys at this point, to get a real speedster and a burner to line up opposite CeeDee Lamb. And I believe that they still have, I can't think of their...
KaVontae Turpin.
KaVontae Turpin, yes, was the UFL star and former UFL star, and now their kick and punt returner. But now he can also be their gadget guy, and you match him up to go along with Matthew Golden and CeeDee Lamb, and the Cowboys have quite a dynamic offense and passing offense to go along with the slight bit of running game that they have.
Just the smallest bit of running game. There's just so many good running backs later that there's just no reason for them to take anybody other than Jeanty at 12. So
it's a deep running back class, but it's not top heavy.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's Jeanty and maybe Omari and Hampton if you really want to stretch, but
I still like Caleb Johnson to slip in. But moving on to the Dolphins here at 13 overall, and look, they need more offensive line help, and they lost a ton of offensive linemen, and I think that they go with probably someone they can plug and play right away from day one, and that's Tyler Booker, the offensive guard out of Alabama, and kind of high for guard maybe, but this is someone who has played at least consistently the last 3 or 4 years at Alabama, and has a strong non-injury history, and someone that the Dolphins need because they just lost Teron Armstead, who retired for this past offseason. And so they need someone who can step in the offensive line, whether that's guard or tackle, but they just need bodies along that offensive line.
Yeah, certainly. I think that this is a reach sheerly off position just because you don't see guards go this early, which I think you should. I don't think that's a good thing. I think you should see guards go earlier, but you just don't. So I think that's a little bit of reach there. But I really like Tyler Booker. He's a guy that 100% should fall into the first round. Don't know if it'd be quite this high, but I love it. I think it's good for you to just go get your guy, because having that true just brick right in the middle of your offensive line there is such an advantage, and such an underrated and kind of overlooked advantage on the offensive line. And I'm so happy it fell this way because there is not a second thought in my head. The Colts absolutely sprint to the podium, and they take Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, right here. This might be my favorite fit in the draft, just with the way they play, the huge running game they have, and the kind of lack of passing game they have right now. This guy's going to force multiply that running game and then fix your passing game. He's going to give a great check down for Anthony Richardson and an absolutely amazing safety blanket with just glue for hands. And then he's also so good as a run blocker rather already, which is one of the hardest things to teach for a tight end transitioning from college to the NFL. He's so solid with that already. He's going to be Anthony Richardson's best friend, and he's going to be Jonathan Taylor's savior right here. So just such a great pick for the Colts, getting the best tight end easily. One of the better tight ends that we've seen in a while, all the way down here at 14.
And this is a great pick for the Colts. And it's funny, the path to the draft for Tyler Warren, who at this point last summer was looked at as a late day 2, day 3 pick. But then he played then he was roughly 75% of the Penn State offense.
Literally.
Then he shot up draft boards and proved to not only be a very capable blocker, but a receiver as well and a red zone threat. And that's just key in the NFL nowadays. And that's just a solid prospect and a nice pickup for the Colts. And moving on to the 15th overall pick in the Atlanta Falcons, who need defensive help. Now, will they draft a running back or a quarterback? Probably. Because every time you think that they're going to draft defensive help, they go and they draft something crazy. So I think that they're going to go and draft something crazy. And I think they're going to go and draft Colston Loveland, the tight end, back-to-back tight ends. And I think they go with the tight end out of Michigan. And that's just because Kyle Pitts has kind of been a disappointment. And he's not this regime's guy. So this regime, for the Falcons, I can't think of their coach right now. Raheem Morris?
Yes.
Yeah. Raheem Morris, who was not the one that drafted Kyle Pitts. And I think that they pick up a new offensive weapon for Michael Penix or Kirk Cousins, whoever ends up starting for the Falcons. We'll see. This could be a point where the Falcons trade Kirk Cousins during this draft. And the way the quarterbacks have fallen, oddly, perhaps Cousins becomes an option in this draft. We'll see. But I think that as far as it goes right now, they go and do something that people don't expect, because that's what the Falcons seem to do, and they draft the tight end out of Michigan.
I'm sorry to kind of repeat myself here, but just like I was talking about the New York teams, where about any other team in the league, I'm like, you're insane for making this pick. But this time 31 teams, I would say that exact thing. But only one team would be crazy enough to do this. And if anyone would do something like this, it would be the Falcons. Makes a lot of sense. And, even if you don't get rid of Kyle Pitts, maybe you run a 2 tight end set and have one of the best receiving 2 tight end sets almost ever in NFL. If you look at these 2 guys, if they both pan out the way it should, you light a little bit of a fire under Kyle Pitts' ass saying like, hey, you're in or you're out, man. Like, get it together.
That's the NFL. You got to produce.
You got to produce, exactly. So I don't hate this pick, actually. It is definitely on the left field. It is absolutely crazy. But in the weird, twisted Atlanta Falcons way, it actually makes a good bit of sense. Everyone said they reached on Penix, and he ended up being pretty damn decent. We'll see.
They said they reached on Bijan.
We'll see if that transfers over into next year when he's a full-time starter and not kind of the reliever quarterback once the season's – I guess I was going to say once the season's over, but they were still fighting for playoff spots when Penix came in.
Yep.
So we'll see if he can do it once it's a full season. But the Falcons are the Falcons. I don't really know what else to say about the Falcons. But now here I will talk more about the Cardinals instead of the Falcons. To be honest, I was kind of thinking about taking Tyler Booker, the guard out of Alabama right here. It made a lot of sense for the Cardinals, but he got scooped up a little earlier than expected. And I think just what the Cardinals need more than anything, last year, the year before that, this coming year, it's just pass rush. So now that comes into who exactly for pass rush you want to take. There's a lot of edge rushers left right now, a lot of different edge rushers, a lot of different kinds of guys. The last person that they took last year was I'm totally blanking on his name now. It's bothering me that I'm blanking on his name because I was a huge fan of him, but he's not a true edge rusher. Darius Garland. No.
Darius Garland's the basketball player.
Darius
Robinson.
Darius Robinson, exactly. He's much more of a kind of inside rusher. He's that true defensive end, inside guy, kind of a 3-4 type guy. So now you want more of a true outside guy, and you're going to get your true outside guy here in Shamir Stewart. He's a little bit more of a true edge rusher. I actually like James Pierce more than him, but he's just a little bit of a reach right here. So you take a guy who's a little more polished, a little more higher floor, because right now you're in a point where you can kind of start competing a little bit, especially after how weak the NFC West showed to be last year due to injuries and different skill issues really throughout most of the teams. So now you kind of are like, hey, we're playing for the now. So you take your Shamir Stewart here. You get a guy who's a little more NFL ready compared to your James Pierce. But I think if they move back, or if kind of the edge rusher situation falls differently, I think James Pierce would also be a very good pickup for them.
I really like James Pierce. I think he's going to do great. He's had some off-field issues, some character issues that's knocking him down draft boards. And saying that he didn't give it his all in his last year at Tennessee, and it was all about him. We'll see.
I feel like you hear that with really good players though, just because they know they're past it. I mean, like you heard it with Micah Parsons for sure. If I remember correctly, you kind of heard it with Myles Garrett. They said he didn't produce how he should have his last year. So sometimes when you're that good, you just know you're on to the next step.
Jadeveon Clowney comes to mind.
Which Jadeveon Clowney is pretty damn good as a rookie, younger years at least. Yeah.
But as far as the Bengals go right now, I think that they also go edge rusher, but I think they go more of the higher ceiling project, raw prospect, and that's Mike Green, the edge out of Marshall. And this guy, he's been one of the top prospects from the edge since the Senior Bowl, where he really showed up and performed and showed that he belonged in at least in the first round, and showed that he had his comparisons to Khalil Mack, who came out of Buffalo, was a small school guy, but still produced very much in the NFL, and I think that he'll have a similar trajectory in the NFL.
Yeah, I really like that pick. This guy reminds me a lot of both Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard, two guys who have found a lot of success there in Lou Amoroto's defense in Cincinnati in general. So I really like that pick. Sometimes you want to get kind of your different guys to rotate through as edge rushers, but sometimes when you have the type of just all-out blitz defense that Lou Amoroto holds there in Cincinnati, sometimes you want guys who are just absolute workhorses. So it makes sense to get the same type of guy. And an absolute workhorse is not a bad type of guy to have in any situation in the NFL. So I really like that pick for the Bengals. So now moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, and I am very much between two players right now. I don't know who I want to pick. Those two players right now are Jahadi Barron and Jahad Campbell. Just kind of look at their needs right now. The Seahawks have really good outside corners with Kobe Bryant and Tariq Woolen, of course, but they don't really have
Devon Witherspoon.
Oh, they have Devon Witherspoon. Okay, thank you for saying that. That made my choice very easy. No point in taking Jahadi Barron. The last time that the Seahawks defense was absolutely elite was when a guy like Bobby Wagner was sitting there at middle linebacker, a really good off-ball linebacker that knew how to control the defense and knew how to absolutely lay the boom when he needed, which is exactly what Jahadi Campbell can be with the right coaching that I think he will very much get from Mike McDonald, who is a defensive-minded head coach there in Seattle. So I think that this is a really good pick for them, a sideline-to-sideline guy, and the off-ball linebacker that they haven't had for a while now. Yes. Thank you for mentioning Devon Witherspoon. That would have been an embarrassing miss.
This is a solid pick for the Seahawks, who get the best off-ball linebacker and one of the best young prospects in the NFL draft, because he's only 21 years old. So Jahad Campbell will continue to get better as the years go on. And moving on to number 19 overall, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have a need in the defensive backfield quite a bit because they have Xavier McCollum and I can't think of who else because
they let go of Murphy Bunting. They don't have him.
They let go of
Carlton Davis.
So they had quite the defensive backfield when Brady was there, but now all those guys are gone, and they need someone to take over that spot next to Antoine Winfield, who is coming back off an injury. That is one guy in their secondary besides Xavier McCollum. But this will be another safety to go with, and I think they go with Malachi Starks to go team him up with Antoine Winfield Jr. to make quite the safety duo and really start to rebuild that defensive secondary. And they complete their safety room with this pick, and I think that he'll fit right in next to Antoine Winfield, who has become an all-pro safety.
Safety over corner is very interesting. Don't dislike it, but
I thought Barron.
I was gonna say Jahadi Barron. I think is just kind of a preference that I have. I think that's what's crazier more than anything. I actually see my Malachi Starks falling to the Vikings. If I was a betting man, if I was putting money on it, I think that he ends up in purple with the Minnesota Vikings. But right here, he goes before the Vikings even get the chance to snag him at 19. So I don't mind it. I like it. And now here comes the Denver Broncos. I feel like with the mock drafts I've seen recently, there's almost been a consensus of Amarian Hampton, the running back out of North Carolina, to the Broncos. And I don't like it. I don't really get it. I understand that they need running back right now, but I think there's so many running backs that you can get later. But as I say that, at the same time, I just don't see really much else that they need right now or much else value that they need right now. Maybe just because he's still on the board, you go get a guy like Jahadi Barron, somebody who can you can put alongside Pat Surtain.
You got Defensive Player of the Year with Pat Surtain and Riley Moss.
But you need a second guy. You need somebody on the other side of that. Riley Moss is more of an inside guy, almost a little more of a safety even, kind of that nickelback position. You need another true outside. But as I already established earlier, I don't really think that's Jahadi Barron either. I think he's a little bit more of a outside to inside or inside to outside guy, however you want to look at it. So this becomes a really tough one all of a sudden. I think that one of their bigger needs right now that isn't even on this one, but kind of one of the needs that I identified when I was looking at their roster is an inside defensive lineman. So I'm going to take a guy that I actually really like who isn't very high on many draft boards right now. Definitely a little bit of a reach compared to kind of the experts or the analysts right now. But I'm going to grab Kenneth Grant, the other defensive tackle out of Michigan. Here's my kind of reach right here. But I love this guy. I think that we're going to see him move up draft boards a little bit over these last 2 weeks. Mason Graham kind of eats up all of the fame on that Michigan inside defensive line. But I think that Kenneth Grant is really solid as well. He's just like Mason Graham, where he's maybe not going to have the highest ceiling out of all of these guys, but he's just got a really good floor, super strong, which is Michigan just seems to put out the best and strongest defensive tackles like I've ever seen. It's so funny that they keep putting these guys out, and they're going to put 2 of these guys out this year. So here's my kind of crazy, what are you doing, yell at me reach, but I'm going to go Kenneth Grant to the Broncos at 20 and shore up that defensive line.
I actually really like that pick. I've seen him rise up in a couple of mock drafts I've recently read. So I'm not surprised. He's kind of the better pass rusher compared to Mason Graham. And he's also the better pass defender as he has multiple pass deflections. So he's able to get those big mitts up at the right time. And moving on to the 21st overall pick, which would have been the Steelers, but I inherit the Panthers instead. So the Panthers needing
everything,
a little bit of everything.
Name a position in football.
They're good.
That's what the Panthers need.
Bryce Young started to turn it around, and I like that. I like to see that. That's good for him because he did not look good to start. So it looked like there was a mistake, and maybe it wasn't in the end. So they have Adam Thielen. They've signed a lot of offensive linemen. They've rebuilt that offensive line in free agency.
Definitely.
I think this is where Jahadi Barron goes because they have J.C. Horn, and even though like you just said, you need two. You almost need three cornerbacks really in the NFL nowadays. And I think that you team him up with J.C. Horn, and I think they made quite the cornerback duo in Carolina there with Jahadae Barron and J.C. Horn, because Barron, like you said, can play both the slot and outside, so he'll fit in wherever he needs to in that Carolina Panthers defense.
No, certainly. I completely agree. I think that's perfect for the Panthers right now. You already got your lockdown number one in J.C. Horn on the outside. So now you get a guy who you can play pretty much anywhere else in the secondary, and he's still going to be a baller for you. So I really like that pickup for the Panthers. And now I fall here to the Chargers, and I very much expected the kind of beautiful pick for the Chargers to still be here, and he is not. My kind of dream pick for the Chargers is Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan. But he goes way back when, I think at like pick 16 or 17.
Falcons.
He gets taken by the Falcons at 15, exactly. So now they're sitting here kind of like, I don't know what to do. So I think that they just watched another interior defensive lineman go off the board a little bit ago with Kenneth Grant. So they're going to go get their guy this time around, and they're going to take the top one left in Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle out of Oregon. I think it just makes a lot of sense for them right now. It's kind of their biggest position of need, so it makes so much sense to just take one of the best players still available. Andy Fitz, it's too perfect for them to not jump up and take.
Yeah, Derek Harmon, he's going to be a good player in the NFL. One of the top all-around defensive tackles, can fit anywhere in a 3-4 or 4-3, so he'll do well. And that was who I was going to pick here.
Oh, stolen right out from under them, which happens to the Packers often.
Just like Cooper DeJean.
Just like Cooper DeJean.
So it says we need edge help. That's just because we have a lot of young edge rushers.
Yeah.
I really like this guy, Brenton Cox Jr. I don't know if I've talked about him a little bit last year. He's kind of was our third rotational guy, but
you realize if you're in the shoes of Brian Gutekunst, Mikael Williams,
I know.
he's right there. He's sitting there.
I know. There's another Georgia player right there.
There's no way they do it again. There's no way they do it again.
And I think, now I talked about this a little bit last time, the Packers taking possibly an offensive lineman, because they have Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom at both bookends, and then both of them are on their last year, their rookie contracts. And you can't probably sign both of them to top end deals. So you take the best offensive lineman still available, and that's the senior Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas, someone who could start right away if need to, but he won't need to at Green Bay, because they'll sign either Zach Tom or Rasheed Walker, and whichever one doesn't sign, Kelvin Banks will step right in and take over for that spot in the offensive line.
Yeah, certainly. I think that makes a lot of sense. You see the Packers go one of two things. They go edge rusher or tackle. It's literally almost a guarantee. It's the two things they do in the first round.
They do like that.
So right here, they go tackle.
Tendencies.
They take the best tackle available for a while. I mean, this guy should have went a long time ago. They get an absolute steal, grabbing him at 23. Like you say, he doesn't even have to start. You let him learn for a year. You let him get NFL ready. Then whoever leaves next year, he is an absolute easy plug and play after getting some NFL experience.
Plays a year as a swing tackle.
I hate that they would get him at this scenario. I really hope that doesn't happen, because I like Kelvin Banks. I think he's going to be very good. So now this is easy for me right here. In my mind, if you're the Vikings, you take the top safety on the board. I think it ends up being Mekhi Starks. He's actually the one I like more. I think he's a little more fitting to kind of the defense Brian Flores likes to run. I think he can learn a lot more from Harrison Smith, who's finishing out what I'd imagine to be his last season, sadly, with the Vikings. You'd think, but he does just keep signing those one-year contracts. I don't know. But because he's already gone, instead you take the Combine Warrior. You get the guy who shot up the most in the Combine. You get Nick Imawari out of the South Carolina. He is just an absolute athletic freak. I think I did the same thing last time. I want to look at his physicals. 6'3", 220, raw athletic score of 10, which is just absolutely insane to have. It just shows how much of an athletic freak he is. And he is going to be fun to put across from Harrison Smith. It's going to be it's going to be the brains and the brawn. It's going to be Harrison Smith playing his kind of assassin role back there, getting those deep safety picks, and then you're going to have Nick Ermorier just absolutely lighting up everybody on the field, being everywhere. I think this is maybe not the best pick, not the smartest picks. I think Stark would be better for the long run, but it's definitely the more fun pick in the scenario.
Yeah, you take the Combine Warrior, and you definitely need somebody to go along with Harrison Smith next season. So you let Cameron Bynum go, and you need somebody to start on that opposite side. So draft a young, raw prospect, South Carolina, someone who can at least be a thumper in the running game early on while he learns to actually play a true safety position. And moving on to the 25th overall pick is the Houston Texans, and they need help along the offensive line because they traded away Laramie Tunsil. They're pretty good along the interior with Kenyon Green and I can't think of their center right now, but he's pretty good. So I think they go with the top offensive tackle left available, and that's Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, who is coming off a torn ACL, but he suffered that in early October. So he does have enough recovery time to come back, and he probably would have been taken earlier had not been for his injury history. But as far as his athletic ability goes and what is shown on the film that was available, he was one of the top offensive tackles available, both a pure run blocker and pass protector.
Yeah, certainly. No, I completely agree with that. I think that he is very good right now. He's a pure left tackle, which after letting Larry Tunsil walk, like you just said, that's such a huge thing to get, is that true blindside protector, especially for a younger guy like CJ Stroud. So I really like that pick, and really good value getting him all the way down here at 25, not having to move at all. Now you move on here to LA in the Rams. I'm going to go with another little bit of a reach here, but a fit that I really like, because I think that this guy is very similar to Matthew Stafford. I know that they did just re-sign him, but you still got to think about the future a little bit. So they're going to take a little bit more of a Packers arc, and then like the way the Packers did taking Jordan Love in 2020. You're going to get your guy now because you like him, and you have the guy that can teach him for the future. They're going to go and maybe be a little early, but I think that regardless of whether it's the Rams or somebody else trading in, trading back, XYZ, however you want to lay it out, I see Jackson Dart getting taken in the first round. In this scenario, I see him getting taken by the Rams at 26 overall. They don't have to move at all. You get your guy for the future. Jackson Dart has so much arm talent, so much accuracy, and that's very similar to what Matthew Stafford can do. Maybe not quite the cannon Matthew Stafford has, but you get Jackson Dart a few off seasons of NFL training and really get that strength up. If he can retain that accuracy and get that arm strength up and have the receiving core that he will eventually with some young guys still there in LA playing really good football, he could be very well set up for the future in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's a surprising pick. The Rams do that. The more you talk about it, the more it does make sense for them because he is a very raw prospect, but a very good prospect. I could see Jalen Milroe going before Jackson Dart.
Oh, I can't.
For two reasons. One, that 40 time. You saw that 40 time.
It was a good time, but
yeah, but
he's a quarterback.
He's a quarterback, but it's a 40 time, and he's one of the few quarterbacks to have been invited to the draft in Green Bay.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes. Huh. I don't know of any others.
The draft has the inside knowledge.
Yes, they have been invited and accepted, but I just know that Jalen Milroe has accepted the invite, so I could see him going a lot earlier than people see because you don't want another green room controversy where you see him fall in the draft, you know.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
So
I don't know. I think Dart goes first round. I don't.
We'll see. I do think Dart goes first round too. But
you think Milroe goes first round as well then?
Yep.
Okay.
Someone trades up. It's not going to happen in this one because I can't think of who, but I think that someone trades up and does that so that he doesn't have to.
Very interesting. Sit. Okay.
But moving on to the Baltimore Ravens, who need offensive line help, and even though they are set along their tackles, they need interior offensive line help, and they go with one of my favorite prospects in the draft this year, Gray Zabel, the North Dakota State offensive lineman. And boy, does North Dakota State kick out offensive linemen. It's those rugged North Dakota State winners that make the offensive linemen. Now, I've seen a couple of North Dakota State winners just because we have family from up there, so I've seen and heard the stories. It gets crazy up in North Dakota. So I think that Gray Zabel is going to come in and be just fine in Baltimore. I think he's going to make an immediate impact along that offensive line, and he'll fit in great sitting next to Tyler Linderbaum in that interior offensive line.
Yeah, 100%. If you didn't put this guy in the first round, I was going to find a way to get him in the first round. He's been a huge riser recently. He's so fun to watch. He's exactly that. He is just one of those big, burly North Dakota boys. He's survived many a winters, many a cold snow game. So he's just been shooting up draft boards. He's going to be a really good player, and I think this is a perfect situation for him because he's still a little raw. Of course, he went to a smaller school, so you're questioning a little bit the competition he saw, how he'll be able to do when he's facing some of those elite players in the NFL. So I think having those good players around him will only help him thrive and kind of grow faster at a faster rate. So I really like that pickup for the Ravens and for Gray Zabel as well. So now moving on to me with the Lions at 28, and the Lions are in a pretty good spot as they usually are because they can just kind of take whatever they want. They have such a good roster from start to finish that you can just look pretty much anywhere and take what you want. So I know that this is a little crazy to say with guys like, especially Mikael Williams on the board, but even guys like Nick Skirton on the board, or maybe even some of the other guys that you could see jump up like JT Tomalio out of Ohio State. But I'm going to go ahead and go with my guy that I liked. I already talked about him a little bit. It's not a need that they have right now at edge rusher, but as much more as a rotational guy. So you can take a risk for the upside, and you take the upside of James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. Maybe it's a little bit of a reach. Maybe he has those off-field issues. Maybe if you have off-field issues, Detroit isn't necessarily the place to be. But even with being all that said, they can take the risk. And I think that this guy has one of the lower floors and the bigger risk, but one of the higher ceilings out of this entire edge rusher group, except for maybe like Abdul Carter, of course. So you take this guy, the small, speedy guy, he's going to go so well with a little bit more of a kind of balanced Aiden Hutchinson on the other side. I love this pick for the Lions.
And this is another combine warrior who showed up at the combine and really improved his draft status and then kind of knocked it down by having some bad interviews. So I think that he does slip into the first round because of his talent alone and his raw athletic ability to just rush the passer.
He ran too fast.
He ran
right past him.
But I think that he'll fit in great in Detroit, where he'll be one of those bad boy kneecap biters to go along in that defensive line. And moving on to the Washington Commanders at number 29 overall. And I think that they're in a win now mode. And when someone gets in a win now mode and you think you need the best offensive talent or defensive talent available, you for some reason go to Georgia. And I think that Washington makes the mistake of drafting Mikael Williams, the edge rusher out of Georgia. And now he's a more pure edge rusher compared to Jalen Walker. So we'll see if he is able to rush the passer a little bit more consistently, since he has more of that pass rushing ability instinct. So I think that he'll do fine in Washington. I just think that he won't do first round ability because that just seems to be the way Georgia players kind of flame out.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, at the very least, whether he actually pans out to be anything or not, the value of them getting him at 29 right now when they need an edge rusher is so huge that it would just be dumb to not take him when he's sitting there looking you in the eyes. So I think regardless of the future, or of what the future holds, I should say, it's a great pick getting him here at 29 for the Commanders. So now moving on to the Buffalo Bills here with the final 3 picks of the 2025 NFL draft for us. I look at Bills, and I know that they do have some guys. They have Keon Coleman, they have Khalil Shakir, But I think with how much this offense passes and how much they just rely on Josh Allen to play hero ball and win them games, you just need to continue to get him weapons. They already have a pretty solid offensive line, and Josh Allen has showed that he doesn't even really need an offensive line to win. He can do it by himself. So since you already have a pretty solid one regardless, you just keep getting him weapons. You just keep getting him playmakers. I see them going receiver here, and they have so many of those weapons already. Khalil Shakir is kind of your behind the line of scrimmage, get the ball in his hands, let him be shaky. And then your Keon Coleman is your dead opposite of send him down the field and he's going to get open. He's going to do something. So you get a guy who's so good in the intermediate. You get a guy who's such a pure route runner already and just a great possession receiver. Going to get open, going to be a stick mover, going to get you some touchdowns in the red zone. You get Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. I can never pronounce his name. I've heard it so many times, and for some reason I just cannot say it. But he was looked at as probably one of the top, if not the top receivers coming into this year. Just didn't have the most solid year. Ironically, he was on a national championship winning team, and his draft stock dropped, which is pretty rare to see. But just because all the team was so good around him that it kind of became is he really the guy that he seemed like he was? But I think that he still finds his way into the first round here because he just does have so much talent. And you need just a good stick mover on your team. And that's exactly what he is. He's going to get you first downs, going to move those sticks.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that. You just got to get Josh Allen more weapons. And Ibuka is probably one of the best wide receivers left available. It's between him and Luther Burden. Just kind of make your pick on whichever one you prefer. I think both of them are going to be fantastic players in the NFL.
Agreed.
And then moving on to number 31 overall, the Kansas City Chiefs, and they need help along that defensive line where they have drafted edge rushers and for their defense, but they haven't added to the interior since Chris Jones. And I think they go with Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle out of Ole Miss, and you team up a Mississippi State guy with an Ole Miss guy, and you're probably going to get some interior fights on the inside. So
that's not a bad thing.
That's not always a bad thing. They'll end up being a band of brothers together, though. And I think that he'll line up and go along great with Chris Jones, who's more of a pure pass rusher, and Walter Nolan's more of the pure run stopper. So I think that he'll make a fantastic teammate of Chris Jones and line up great and fit that defensive rotation that they have in Kansas City.
And then finally, here I am with the Eagles. I don't know why, but the 32nd pick is always one of the hardest in my mind. Because, it's so easy to trade back. You could just see anybody trade back into the first round to get whatever they want exactly. You can see them stay there and pick. You can see them take just the top player available. You can see them take their biggest need. You can see them take a risk, some guy that they think is going to be really good in the future, but just not really sure right now. I'm actually going to go with the risk right here. And I think that this might sound a little silly with how well set up they are at corner right now. But I think that this guy finds his way into the first round. He was injured last year, which made him drop, but he's went into last year being one of the top corners in the league. I'm going to have them going with Callan's guy. I did not know much about him. And then Callan pointed him out last time we did the mock draft 2 weeks ago. I did a little more research on him, and I really like this guy. I think he finds his way into the first round. Siobhan Ravel, the corner out of Eastern Carolina. I think that he finds his way in there. I just think it makes so much sense for them to take a risk on a corner right here, just sheerly because they can. If you really want to do something, you can maybe move Cooper DeJean more into a safety role and just have him play that nickel and safety because they are a little weak at safety right now after losing C.J. Gardner-Johnson this offseason. But they also lost Darius Slay this offseason. So you're going to need another corner to go across from Quinion Mitchell, regardless of what you want to do with Cooper DeJean. So you continue to build on that young, talented secondary, and you take a little bit of a reach, but a guy with some huge payoff if he does hit, Siobhan Ravel.
I love this pick, and I think that Siobhan Ravel is going to be a great player in the NFL. He's a little bit of mix of Sauce Gardner and Joey Porter Jr., where he doesn't have the top end intercepting ability of Sauce Gardner. He's kind of a poor man's Sauce Gardner and a poor man's Joey Porter Jr. And you mix them together and you get Siobhan Revell. And I think that he's going to be a great fit in this Eagles secondary, who's, again, steal my favorite player in the draft for the second year in a row. and continue to build that young secondary to lead them to possibly a second Super Bowl or a third Super Bowl.
Yeah, this is possibly one of the weirdest mock drafts you'll ever find, especially if you want to talk about just sheerly the top 10 picks. I mean, this isn't necessarily a good thing to say, but I dare you to find another mock draft in the world that looks anything like this. And we did not do it on purpose. It is just how it fell.
That's
and
how the live ones
that
go.
is exactly why I love the live mock drafts, because it happens in real life. Something happens, and one little Jenga piece is pulled, and that whole tower falls. And everybody panics. You just don't know what's going to happen after that. And that is exactly what happened in our top 10, maybe even top like 15, 16 picks. And then it kind of mellowed out after that. But it was absolutely insane to start. But it's fun to see. You know, you see some of those quarterbacks fall. You get some of the other high-end talent taken. And then you get a lot of steals kind of in that last and the bottom half of the first round in those last 16 picks. So this is just one of thousands and millions and billions of ways the draft could go. Is it a likely one? Probably not. Is it possible, though? Anything is possible. So thank you all so much for watching our second live mock draft. This is it for the mock drafts. I think we're actually going to get canceled and banned from live mock drafts after this monstrosity. But nonetheless, next week you will see, not sure if it'll be a full episode or just kind of a post, but we'll both do our final real predictions and our own mock drafts for what we actually think the 2025 NFL draft will shake out to be. And then the week after that will be, well, none other than the draft. And then, of course, no live episode this year, as Callan and I will be in Green Bay, hopefully front row, if not at least like front 5 or 10 rows of the draft, watching those guys get picked. So really excited for that. Really happy to kind of do these live mock drafts again. They are far and away my favorite thing to do throughout the entire year of Eating W's. So hopefully you guys enjoy them as much as I do. Thank you all so much for the support, and thank you all so much for watching this episode and our live mock draft. And until next time, don't forget
to eat the W.